What's up? It's Raphael with the NBA Draft Junkies podcast, and I have a special guest today. I guess you can say collaborative. We've worked together in the past to talk NBA draft, and we've done probably 2 or 3 mock drafts. Is that correct?
Yeah, at least a couple.
At least a couple.
But yeah, might have been 3. I don't know. Yeah, they all kind of blended together.
Yeah, it all seems like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. But my guest today is Mikey Visenberg from the Viseland podcast. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. I don't think I'm a very special guest or anything like that, but I really appreciate being on the show, and it's great to finally talk to you one-on-one. Also repping Perspective Insight, which is the shirt that I'm wearing, and I collaborate with perspectiveinsight.com and work with the founder, Matt McKay, and a great group there. But yeah, Viseland is definitely my passion. I do with my brother, Jason Visenberg, and I have just been writing about and focused on the NBA draft for a number of years. So it's great to come across somebody like Raphael, who just knows the draft about as well as anybody else.
Thanks. I think it's a good compliment. I don't know about as much as anybody else, but I'm hoping to get to that point.
We're all working there.
Yes, that's definitely true, because it's one of those things where you have to really love it, like putting in the time and hours that, we're putting in to watch guys, and, very few of us, if any of us, are getting paid for it. It's just something that we love doing. And that's why I think the whole, I guess, NBA draft, Twitter, that it's like a community within itself, because we all have a love for the NBA draft and college basketball and scouting, and it's something that we're doing for fun. So tell me a little bit about the Perspective Insight. I mean, I've seen the tweets, and I've seen it out and around on social media, but what exactly is it, and what are you doing for them?
So for Perspective Insight, we're just trying to get as much background, as much information on prospects as possible. It was run by Matt McKay Jr., who was a scout for, worked for the Portland Trailblazers and for the Charlotte Hornets. And Matt obviously has a great background as far as scouting is concerned. We just have a bunch of guys who are involved in the basketball community and basketball field, trying to get as much information as possible and kind of getting scouting services to colleges, to NBA teams. But the things that we have for the public, we have some great Q&A series with some top prospects, mainly high school guys, but we're branching into some college guys as well and international players. And then we have a YouTube channel also, the Perspective Insight YouTube channel, that has some great high school highlight breakdowns of prospects, where we go past just the highlights as well and show you like maybe some of those good plays that their teammates didn't finish, or some of the other little like shots where they made a nice move and they may have missed. So yeah, the Pro Insight videos I think are fantastic. We recently had some that came out for the G League Ignite guys, where we got the footage for that and put out some videos that I don't think are necessarily going around the public too much right now. So it's definitely something that if you like the draft community, if you like to know about top high school players, follow Pro Insight on Twitter and follow the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
perspectiveinsight.com.
Okay. I mean, I've scrolled through it on social media and on Twitter. I just didn't know like all the details. Now, when you say as far as like gathering information, is it intel also on players?
Yes. Yeah. We like to know as much background as possible. We go into family, high school history, just accomplishments, all of those things. And we like to find like the little nuggets that kind of separate players, learn about their work ethic, learn about kind of, what they feel about themselves as players. We have a bunch of questions that we get into that I think gives a really nice background on the players. I find that the interviews that we do, I don't necessarily do all of the interviews. I've done a few that are not public, but I I just find that the interviews that we do, we get like some great background, and you really learn about the player like as a person as well. And
Right.
I think that's a part of the NBA draft equation that doesn't necessarily get factored in as much as people kind of believe that it matters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and he works for an NBA team, and his job is to scout and gather intel, but it's on players 1 through 15 on a roster. And even he was even saying, even in the NBA, once a guy is drafted or he's played 5 to 10 years, you still want to have that type of intel because players can be traded or free agency or guys can be waived and cut. So teams want to have as much information on each player just in case they sign them or they become available. And the average person thinks it's all about what we see on the court, just their production, which that's the main thing. But there's so much that goes behind. While there's some guys that the talent is not a question, but they're not signed right now, and I think a lot of that could be based off of intel that was going around. All right, so let's get into it. So this particular episode, I want to talk about some prospects that are just kind of flying under the radar. Yeah, everybody's talking about, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, Evan Mobley, but I wanted to talk about some of the guys that, like I said, are flying under the radar. So give me a couple of names that you think are possible first round draft picks that not a lot of people are talking about right now.
I'll give you a few. And yeah, this whole under the radar thing, see, I'm a guy that, as much as the draft from 1 to 60 intrigues me, I always love watching the guys at the top of the draft. I like the stars that you build around. But of course, with the draft, you need to go deep. And there are a few guys that I think are, I guess it's hard to call them under the radar because remember, at this point last year, Patrick Williams and Devin Vassell weren't necessarily deemed like lottery guys. They were kind of more that got to the late first round point, then got to mid first round, and then they became big lottery guys. So it changes throughout the year. But a few guys that have really stood out to me, I'll say Kai Jones from Texas, Day'Ron Sharpe from North Carolina, and Miles McBride from West Virginia are all guys that I think have a chance to be first round picks this year.
So what do you like about Kai Jones? He's someone that I'm starting to see a buzz around his name. I think that he's obviously benefited from Texas, their success, and I'm glad to see that program doing well. Greg Brown was the one that everybody was paying attention to coming into the season, which has definitely helped Kai Jones. He's not even starting, but some are saying that they think he might be the best NBA prospect on the Texas roster. So what do you like about Kai Jones?
So the thing that stands out about Kai Jones is that, first off, he just moves really well for a big guy. He's about 6'11" or so. His measurements, I don't think, are like crazy out of this world, but the fluidity and agility for a big man stand out right away. Just his ability to cover ground on offense and defense. He it certainly seems to have quite a bit of defensive potential just with that lateral movement as well. And then, yeah, just some of the moves that he's been able to make, like in the half court, like off of the dribble, even making pull-up jump shots at times. And yeah, his shooting, I think, was a big bonus this year where, he started shooting really, really well. He started the season off with like basically shooting at a clip that was just
ridiculous.
Not something that, yeah, exactly. Like it was nothing that he could keep going. But yeah, he was doing it against good teams as well. To me, when I've watched Texas, like I know they start Jericho Sims and Greg Brown, but Kai Jones seems like the most intriguing prospect to me. With Greg Brown, he obviously, the guy has some incredible vertical athleticism. Like that was always the thing with him. I got a chance to see Greg Brown from, I guess, since his sophomore season in high school. And so for 3 years at USA Basketball, I would see Greg Brown, and like the guy is a terror in transition.
Yeah.
He's a great slasher. Yeah, absolutely. Like freaky vertical athlete. But the concerns, and the other thing that Greg Brown is doing is he's shooting an insane clip like of 3-pointers. So like his volume of 3-pointers right now is crazy. But he has 1 assist in like 8 games or 9 games. You know, yeah, like there are factors to Greg Brown's game that are kind of up for dispute, and I think Kai Jones has kind of shown a little bit more of like that quick decision making and the handle, and you know, just things that you're really intrigued with for a big man. So yeah, that plus the athleticism, and it seemed like he really worked on his body. Like I felt like there was definitely a change from his freshman year to this year.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at his numbers, they don't really stand out. Around 9 points, 5 rebounds, but the field goal percentage at 64.7%, and he's shooting 46% from three, a little over 46%. And like you said in the beginning of the season, I think it was at one point it was like 90.
Yeah, I know.
Shoot like 90% from the floor the first couple games, something crazy like that. But yeah, I've liked what I've seen, and even though like the last maybe like 5 games, he's been under double figures 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah.
He just has a skill set and positional size and length. Well, I guess the length is questionable, but he just has a baseline of physical tools that you can work with.
Yeah. And that's what I see. And I feel like once Big 12 play gets going, like as we saw, they crushed Kansas last night.
Yep.
And they're like a legit good team. Like they have guards. The wing situation is a little weird, but yeah, like they have guards. They have athleticism to spare. Yeah. And yeah, like their big guys are all crazy athletes. Like even Jericho Sims is a crazy athlete too.
Yeah, he was someone when I saw him as a freshman, I really liked him a lot. Yeah. And I thought that he was going to have a similar rise just based off of his athleticism.
When I went to Adidas Nations and he was playing a game against DeAndre Ayton, and he blocked DeAndre Ayton at the rim. And this was when he was like really skinny too, but just crazy athlete. The shot always looked really, really weird. So that was like the big thing with him. But yeah, like certainly there was athleticism to spare. He got a lot stronger. Like you look at his body now, and it's still good. Like a really good college player, but yeah, just not a guy that I feel is necessarily that level of like NBA prospect anymore.
Yeah, he's just not progressing like I thought he would. I just thought he was going to have a really big breakout sophomore year and possibly enter the draft. And then I thought, well, at least this year should be a breakout year. I thought he would come out early, and then he just ended up – the longer he stayed in college really benefited him and helped him out some.
Yeah. Do you feel like Jericho Sims will be a guy that comes back for like a 5th year, like since this year is basically like a wash?
Is he a senior now? Has it been that long?
He is. Yeah.
Wow, man. I'm thinking that he was –
time flies, man. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm thinking that he was a junior. Well, no. Even though this is a free year, no, it probably doesn't make sense to come back for another year.
Yeah.
Man,
I'm kind of wondering if some guys will just do that. Like, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's hurting the high school recruiting. I know I've seen some of the high school players that they were being heavily recruited by schools. And then once it was made known that this is like a free year, some schools kind of backed off of them, and they're more so recruiting transfers or hoping that their players stay along. So we'll see. I don't think it makes much sense for him. But then again, you never know, because of the way everything is going in the basketball world as far as like jobs overseas and the money being tight. I mean, there's a lot of really talented, high-level players that are at home right now just because they're not in the EuroLeague. Some of the EuroLeague teams cut their budget. And there's just a lot of guys at home, and we haven't even had the G League draft yet. And I'm curious to see if some of these guys that have been playing EuroLeague that are at home right now, if they're going to just put their name in the G League draft. So, oh man, weird times going on here. Weird times. All right, give me another prospect that actually we'll go to Day'Ron Sharpe in North Carolina. What do you like about him?
Another player that I had the chance. So before COVID happened, I was originally supposed to the event that I have covered for the last 8 years up until this year was the Nike Hoop Summit. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I live in Portland. I used to live in Toronto and fly out from Toronto, have family in Portland, but I would go to the Nike Hoop Summit. Day'Ron Sharpe was supposed to be in the Nike Hoop Summit. I got to see him at October minicamp in 2019, and I was sitting with some NBA scouts, and he really stood out in the scrimmage that we were watching. Not to mention the fact that, he's like 6'9", 6'10", 250 pounds, these big hands, and really good passer as well. So the playmaking, some potential on the defensive end also. But the thing that I think really intrigued the scouts, and hasn't necessarily been like a huge part of his game, but he stepped out and made a couple jump shots.
Yep.
And he even made a three-pointer.
And I have that on my list as one of the things that I think his potential, but also the potential to put the ball on the floor and attack closeouts once he becomes a more consistent shooter or a threat to where defenses are going to step out on him. I think that he can make plays on the move from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him. I mean, like you mentioned, his size, physical guy. I don't know his wingspan, the reports, but just based off of what I've seen.
7'2", 7'3".
Yeah, it looks like it's
around there.
Yeah, it looks like he has a plus wingspan. I think at the minimum, he just has a role as an energy guy that can come in, he'll rebound, provide energy. But I like the passing, like you said. That's something that makes his skill set unique, because you don't usually see a 250-pound banger, bruiser, energy guy with passing instincts and the potential to be a floor spacer. Now, what do you think is an area that he needs to work on? Like for me, I feel like he needs to improve his left hand and just kind of add a little bit more like soft touch finishes like around the rim.
Yeah, I'd go with that, and then just stretching out the jump shot too. Yeah, I think that's such a huge thing for big men in the modern game. But yeah, like you were saying, like I feel like the quick processing with him is what has made him really intriguing. And going to a situation like North Carolina where they have like 4 big guys that they're all going to play, whose best position would be center, but you're likely going to play out of position. I think him being in that situation and doing as well as he has, really great sign for him. Obviously was on a fantastic high school team in Montverde as well. And like, it's pretty crazy the fact that Montverde looks like they could have 4 guys who are first-round picks in this year's draft from last year's team. And I think Sharpe certainly could be on that list. I just think NBA teams are going to be really intrigued with the size, the strength, and that quick processing, the passing ability. I just think he's a guy that you can really build upon as far as reaching that potential.
What do you think about him as a rim roller? Because I felt like when I watched film, I didn't see a lot of pick and roll plays where he was being used as a roller. How do you feel about him as a roller in the NBA?
I still am not very sure about that either. Like, that doesn't seem to be like a huge part of it with him. It's kind of more off of cuts and slashing. But yeah, it's certainly an area he can work on as well. And then also, like, if he has that ability to pass out of the short roll, another huge factor for big men in the modern game as well.
Yep, I agree 100%.
The last guy who I kind of felt had possible first round vibes was Miles Deuce McBride from West Virginia. And he's just somebody, again, when you're talking about like processing and awareness on the defensive end, I think he has about a 6'8" wingspan. He's about 6'2", 6'3". And then the other thing that I feel has been like, he was impressive as a freshman. And this year, I think he's gotten a lot more confident in his pull-up shooting and shooting in general. So yeah, like the other night against Oklahoma State, there just were a few times where he hit some of those key pull-up jumpers. West Virginia was down by about 19 points. I think a huge part of the reason that they came back was Cade Cunningham being in foul trouble. But they came back, and Miles McBride, like all year, they played a pretty tough schedule. I feel West Virginia's like played in some pretty big games considering how college basketball has looked so far. And I think he's looked really good. And he's almost like in kind of like a DeAnthony Melton-ish kind of role. That would be the guy that I would think is a possible comparison. And as we see, DeAnthony Melton, key factor for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm not sure if you saw the game last night against the Lakers, but
I saw did he have like a block or something like that?
He blocked Anthony Davis on the perimeter, then ran the other way and dunked on Talen Horton-Tucker.
Yeah, okay.
It was super impressive. And he signed for like basically like a backup deal, but that's still like $9-10 million.
Wasn't it 35 million or something like that?
Yeah, I think over 4 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like he signed for a good amount of money. He was starting for a lot of games for the Grizzlies last year. But yeah, so Miles McBride is like, I think similar. I'm not sure he's like the stocks monster or the level of rebounder that DeAnthony Melton was when he was at USC, but he does a lot of things that I think are quite similar. And then when you're looking at the defensive awareness, you kind of worry a little bit about his like ball handling, and you don't want him to be your main like primary facilitator. But I think just as a complementary guard, he has some things that are very positive looks.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a pretty decent rebounder for a guard, for a point guard.
Yeah.
He's shooting the ball well, over 41% from three. But the steals are there. He's averaging almost 2 steals a game. So yeah. I can see there, but I guess like you said, the blocks is that's the biggest difference between him and Melton.
Well, yeah, and Melton, like when you talk about like rebounding and like as far as steal and block percentages, like Melton was just out of this world when he was at USC. Like I know people with draft models were like, DeAnthony Melton like broke my draft model. Like, you know, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, Deuce certainly, like I feel at least kind of expanding on that kind of point guard ability at West Virginia. I don't think that's ultimately going to be his role, but just working on the playmaking, the processing, and then showing the fact that, you know, he can shoot the ball, all look to be really positive factors. Is like maybe being like a smaller guard next to a big initiator like a Luka Doncic or Ben Simmons or somebody like that.
Yeah, well, one thing you know for sure about him, based off of where he chose to go to college and who his coach is, he's definitely tough. You have to be tough and have some grit to play for Huggins in West Virginia. I mean, I enjoyed watching Javon Carter when he was there. He was just a dog on the court, and he still is. And he's been able to carve out a career in the NBA by just being a tough, physical guard, and he's added a little bit more offense to his game. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. You know what you're getting when you get a player out of West Virginia. So you're saying that you think that he has first round. You think he can sneak in the first round?
I think there's certainly a possibility.
Yep.
Yeah, like I Ref, like it's pretty wide open at this point.
I agree.
Like and some players who we felt were possible lottery picks and possible one and dones, not looking that way. A few guys who we weren't necessarily so sure about, looking like they may be, like the two guys I'm thinking of, Caleb Love for the first category, Moses Moody for the second category.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of movement, and I don't feel like the top of the draft right now is looking pretty solid.
Yep.
Like, obviously the top 3 guys are looking pretty solid. I know some people really like the, Jalen Green or Jonathan Kuminga, but I think most people would have Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, and Jalen Suggs at the top of the draft in some order at this point. And, it was a lot like last year where you had Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball seen as the top 3 guys and ended up staying that way. So, yeah, I think the top 5 guys are looking pretty solid right now. Things could still happen there. Everybody from then on, there's going to be a lot of movement, and I feel like, especially near the end of the first round, there are going to be some names that slip up or come up that we maybe aren't even talking about right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like last year in a sense to where, remember how last year we felt like anywhere between 15 through 35 was interchangeable? I'm thinking this draft is kind of heading in that direction because I don't think there's a really wide gap, at least as of now, first week of January, between guys that I have going in the mid-first round to, the top 5 to 10 picks in the second round. All right, so let's get into some other guys that you may not have as first-round grades right now, but you think that they possibly could be, or guys that you just think that could possibly get drafted?
Yeah, just a few guys. I kind of have a category of a few guys who are wings who show a lot of defense and have some playmaking ability, but aren't necessarily – the shooting is the big question mark. Mm-hmm. And Romeo Weems is somebody from DePaul, has always been somebody that just from an analytic perspective, and when he was playing with USA Basketball, when he was playing in the EYBL, always really stood out, was like a stocks monster, had a really good year as far as defensive playmaking as a freshman at DePaul also, while showing some playmaking abilities, great strength, I believe a 6'11" wingspan as well. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking he's in like the 230 range and a good athlete. So, yeah, Romeo Weems is somebody who I think DePaul had a late start. But
yeah, I mean, how many games has he played? 2, 3?
I think he's only played a couple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's still, there's a lot more to go, obviously, with Romeo Weems, but just somebody who at least has shown some positive contributions in the early going. David Johnson was another player who, as a freshman, showed a lot of promise. And especially with his playmaking ability, but just a great defender, excellent ability to mirror offensive players, and he has about a 6'10" wingspan as well. The last measurements I had for him were from USA Basketball in October 2017, but had a 6'9.5" wingspan, 6'3.5" without shoes, close to 200 pounds, and 8'6" standing reach. So good size, definitely enough size to be a wing player. And, still not seen as the primary guy. You're still wondering about his shooting, but there, I think, are a lot of progressions with his handle and has looked really good in the early year. You have Aaron Henry, who has been somebody who's
on radar for a while.
Been on the radar for quite a while. Yeah. Yep. Ever since Tom Izzo yelled at him in the NCAA tournament, and he came out that next game and killed it. He's been a really good player for Michigan State. Obviously, as a freshman, was a key player on a Final Four team. And this year, the shooting still being a big issue, but he has the playmaking. He's an excellent defender. He has plus length. And then the handle is something that has always been pretty solid for him also.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, one of the things about Johnson that I like is the improvement from deep. He was a very, I don't even know if reluctant is the word to use last year as a freshman from shooting from 3. He only took 23 3-point attempts. This year, he's already taking more, and he's 14 for 31. So he's connecting at about 45% from 3. So the promise as a shooter, the upside is there. His free throw shooting has improved also. He's went from 60% to 77%.
Yeah.
So the growth and potential is definitely there. But I like how he, like you said, as far as the playmaking, he kind of fills it up. Good rebounder, averaging about 6 rebounds a game and 4 assists. I really like prospects, not just looking at the raw stats, but guys that I know they'll rebound, but they can also make plays for others. And that's why I'm not as high on, for example, Josh Christopher. I know he can score.
Mhm.
I know he can fill it up. But I think he might have, off the top of my head, like 12 assists all season. No, either 12, maybe it's like 8 assists and 12 turnovers, something like that. And while I think he's a tremendous scorer when he has the ball in his hands and you run ISO plays for him, it's the other things like the passing. And I would take a guy that is not as creative of a scorer, but can put the ball in the basket, but I know can make the right reads and cuts and find players. So that's one of the things I like about Johnson is the 4 assists per game.
I'm with you on that. One thing with Josh Christopher that I will say is I think part of that could be the role. And granted, like he has never been, he's always been that score first guy.
Yep.
But right now he's basically playing with like a couple other guards. And I think what he's being asked to do is more in a scoring role. But what I will say is that you were dead on with the 8 assists to 12 turnovers. And it is concerning. Like that is something that you just kind of worry a little bit about. Like if he isn't too one-dimensional, like the thing that you really look for is that quick processing, the ability to get your teammates some easy scores. And, if they're not showing that when you're watching them play, then that's a huge issue. Like with Cade Cunningham, for instance, like I'm not concerned about his passing. And I know his assist to turnover ratio right now isn't necessarily out of this world, but if you just watch Cade Cunningham play, you see the passes that he makes. Like I feel like he should be averaging like twice as many assists this year.
Yep.
So I'm not really concerned about him as a passer. I would be more concerned about a guy like Josh Christopher, and I do feel like it's going to be a strength for David Johnson.
Another prospect. So you mentioned Henry, who, like you said, seems like he's been on draft boards for, I guess, 2-3 years now. So who's another prospect that you has caught your attention this year?
There are a couple freaky athlete guys that I wanted to bring up. One is Tavion Kinsey for Marshall.
I saw someone tweet the most exciting player in college basketball.
He's actually third in the NCAA in dunks right now, which he's like 6'5", 6'6". So that's crazy.
Yeah,
that is crazy. Not to mention he's shooting better. He's doing a lot of the other things better this year. I think at least like slightly improved handle. He's still very much like a slasher and paint guy, and he's not taking a huge amount of 3-pointers. The other thing that's kind of crazy is like his block and steal numbers are still pretty low, which when you're thinking of a freaky athlete, you would hope that both of those would be better at the NCAA level. You also would like to see him get better rebounding numbers considering his athletic advantage over everybody, but he just has this great ability to finish near the basket. And, almost like you see you're a Blazer fan as well. So, I watch a lot of Blazers.
Derek Jones don't remind me about last night.
Well, I won't remind you about last night, but there were a few positive things that came out of last night. And, the forwards are still getting acclimated.
12 points a game. That's what they're averaging combined. 12 points per game.
It's going to get better, Raf.
I hope so, because, I wanted Saddiq Bey. And I felt like if they would have kept Ariza, kept the pick at 16, we could have had Ariza and Saddiq Bey.
I still feel like I feel like there are a lot of positives on the defensive end happening right now with both of those guys.
With those guys,
I think the offense is going to come. And like Rocco was in the first half, you saw things happening when Rocco was finally hitting shots.
Yeah.
And then in the second half, nobody could hit shots. You saw Nurk miss a bunch of his little near the basket shots, and
He's so out
yeah,
of shape.
it was a mess. It was a mess,
Yeah.
but I still have hope. And I think Tavion Kinsey is one of those guys who likely gets drafted on that upside of just being a freak athlete and kind of hoping that you can show him little things. Like Derrick Jones Jr., I don't think was ever considered like a can't miss NBA role player kind of guy.
Yeah.
Because you were worried about the skill. You were worried about the shooting. He's at least improved a great deal as far as that is concerned, not to mention having like top tier athleticism, and that one dunk he had.
It looked like one of the dunks at halftime with the when the guy is in the mascot uniform and his body is almost horizontal.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Man, my friend Polarfall, just part of Draft Twitter community out of Korea, he had a GIF of that dunk from NBC Sports Northwest, and they have it in slow motion. I retweeted it. So if people want to check it out, my Twitter is NBA Draft Mikey V. Also follow, I think his Twitter name is @Polarfall or @Skyfall, but yeah, he's just another person to follow on Draft Twitter. But yeah, Tavion Kinsey, crazy athlete, and has I think been like a really productive college player this year, and I'm guessing is likely going to be on the NBA draft radar. You're just not exactly sure who he is at this point or where he fits in and if his skill set translates beyond the athleticism. But the other player that I wanted to mention who's just a crazy athlete and like just levitates basically is Yves Pons.
Yeah.
And Yves Pons is a 6'7" maybe. Like I'm thinking 6'6", but he's a center.
Yeah.
The thing that makes him a center is like he basically has like Zion Williamson leaping ability. He just can stay in the air for an absurd amount of times from either a standstill or from a running start. Some of the blocks that he makes are absurd. He has great lateral movement. And then I don't know if you saw that picture of Tennessee, Raph, during the summer where they all had their shirts off and like
he's
flexing.
ripped. I've actually interviewed him. I did a podcast interview with him. I want to say it was like July 4th. So I was thankful that even though he's French and he probably didn't care about the 4th of July, but he came on, we did an interview, and it wasn't, I don't know if it was July. It was a holiday. I know that much. But at that point, he was undecided on whether he was going to come back or stay in the draft. And that was one of the things we discussed. And I had mentioned that I felt like he was a Robert Covington type player, especially when Covington was playing the 5 with the Rockets. And I think like there's value for a guy that can be a shot blocking wing defender that can defend, he can switch out on guards. He can defend multiple positions, but also protect the rim at the same time. I know offensively his numbers are a little bit down this year compared to last year, but his calling card is going to be his defense. If he can just shoot 35% from 3, he's going to make a lot of money in the NBA.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I
think, yeah. Oh my gosh. And he, even like as a freshman, when he was basically like not getting any playing time, there was intrigue about him just based off of what he had done in FIBA for France.
Yep.
And his like insane athleticism. So like I guess he used to kind of be seen as a wing, and he can defend wings. So I'm very much with you on like his ability to step out and defend the perimeter. But I think his calling card is going to be as like a small ball 5.
Yep.
And I think he has the athleticism and defensive instincts to do that. You just hope that he can get some garbage buckets and improve as a shooter. And that could make him a really valuable backup big man.
Yeah, what's interesting is I felt like if Houston would have been successful, right? Let's say they made a deeper playoff run with Covington at the 5. I think Pons draft status would have shot up, because some team would have been like, okay, he can fill this role as a switchy rim protector, because Covington in the bubble was, I felt like, just off the top of my head, he might have been blocking like 2 shots a game.
Yeah.
And I think
his defensive numbers in the bubble were crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, in the playoffs, he was shooting like 50% also from 3.
Yeah.
Like that made him so valuable.
Yeah, we need that. We need that version to show up in
that's what I was hoping for. But yeah, during the regular season, he was like what? Like I think like 32%, somewhere around there. And yeah, so I knew that he wasn't going to be bubble Covington, but I still have hope. And I like, you know, obviously they're a new team. They're kind of getting all the pieces together. Luckily, bubble Gary Trent Jr. seems to still be around, so that's nice. And he looked really good. But yeah, I think I still have hope. I still have hope with the Blazers forwards.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know if you saw the article that came out today from John. I can't think of the guy's name. He's the beat writer for the Oregonian. It was not nice.
Panzano?
Yeah. It was not nice. He definitely took his shots at O'Shea and Stotts, and in so many words basically said that it might be time for them to go.
Well, what else is new?
But I want to get back to Kinsey.
Panzano always hits you when you're down, man.
That's definitely true. I wanted to get back to Kinsey. As far as like his efficiency this year, his efficiency numbers are crazy. 62% from the floor, 50% from 3.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I mean,
the 3 is crazy. The 3
I mean, it's only 18 shots, but he's 9 of 18. But for a guard or wing to shoot 62% from the floor is ridiculous. And
a lot of those are ducks. A lot of those are close shots. But still.
But it's a skill set to be able to get there, you know? I mean, there's a lot of guys that I've seen that are like really good athletes. Like I use Terrence Ferguson, for example. I've known T. Ferg since he was in high school. He is a top tier athlete, top 5% in the NBA. His athleticism
off of
does
1
not.
foot, though.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him jump off of in jeans, just windmill, but his athleticism does not translate on the court.
Yeah,
and so I felt like
get to the line ever, like that's
or the rim. And at one point, I felt like it was an argument between me and some friends who was more athletic, Jones Jr. or Ferguson. They both have the same wiry frame, but Derrick Jones Jr. was able to use his athleticism and have it translate. And I think Ferg, because he had the reputation of being such a good shooter, he always relied on his jump shot. His jump shot hasn't really translated to the NBA. And I think that other parts of his game, as far as being an energy guy, he never really had to at the younger levels, because all he did was shoot threes. And now it's coming back to hurt him. While I think with Jones Jr., he was able to use his athleticism on the defensive end and kind of carve out a role for himself as a defender and energy guy. And then once the offense comes, he's going to be good. But back to Kinsey, I think that he has found a way. I shouldn't say I think. He has found a way to use his athleticism to be effective. And even if it's just getting to the rim, he's been able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Using your athleticism or your advantages functionally is huge.
Yeah,
and with T. Ferg, I was at the Hoop Summit where he made the 6 threes in like 3 minutes. Like that was crazy. But I think people, like you said, with the jump shooting, people just felt like he was this great catch and shoot player, and that wasn't necessarily like the averages didn't necessarily back that up. Especially once he got to Australia. And you're right. Like he just never found a way to use his athleticism as functionally as you would hope, because he is a crazy 1 foot leaper.
Yep.
And I think Jones has just found a way to make those crazy fast cuts And he's still skinny, Derek Jones Jr., but the fact that he can get all of these dunks in game is absolutely crazy, especially in the half court as a cutter. Finishing above the rim is his calling card. And he's improved a bit as a shooter as well.
Yep.
So the fact that Kinsey is dunking because 21 out of his 62-point field goals are dunks. And then the other ones are like really impressive finishes, like sometimes through traffic and just using the athleticism, using some touch also. So yeah, I know like one of his first games, my friend Zach Milner posted all of his 9 field goals were in the paint.
Yep.
Every one. Which for a guy who's 6'5" is just crazy.
So, well, no, 185 pounds is crazy.
Yeah. That too.
Yeah.
So very Derek Jones Jr. as far as that's concerned.
Yep.
And very T. Ferg.
Yeah, he's.
But yeah, I think closer to the functional athleticism than maybe leaving some things to be desired.
Jason Preston. I am a big Jason Preston fan. I jokingly say he looks like the 4th Ball brother. He looks more like LaMelo and Lonzo than Jello does. And he even kind of plays like them as far as just the passing instincts, the rebounding, the shot selection. I mean, he really looks like the 4th Ball brother. But he was someone that I knew a little bit about coming into the year. And then it was the Illinois game that kind of put him on the radar big time. And, man, I really like him. And I feel like I like him even more hearing his story because he has like the ultimate underdog story. For those who don't know his story, I think he was playing like JV, then he played varsity, didn't have any offers, and he sent like some tape, and he just kind of marketed himself. And then did he go to like a prep school or something like that? And
so he was set once he graduated high school, he was set to go to UCF as a student,
right?
Like not play basketball. I think he was shorter at the time too. I think he was like something like 6'1". Goes to a prep school. They have a number of level of teams at the prep school. I think they had like up to like a D team. I think he starts with the C team, moves up to the B team, gets the A team, wants to go back down to the C team, kills it there against what he, I guess, called like rec competition, basically. Moves back up to the A team, and I think his only offer might have been Ohio.
Yeah,
it was. I think Ohio and maybe one other school.
Yeah, one other school. Yeah.
Yeah. So he just incredible story. Grows a little bit as well. Role player immediately there. As a sophomore last year, was putting up some really intriguing numbers, and just you see the assist numbers, and you just see the ability to play in pick and roll, which is very enticing to his NBA translation. Very quick processor, great touch around the basket, like a really crafty guard.
Yeah, because he's not fast, he's not athletic.
No.
And I feel he uses that to his advantage because he plays at his own pace. You can't really speed him up. And even though he's not playing fast, his decision making is quick, like you said. And he uses his size to see over the top of defenders, and he can make skip passes. He can hit the roll man. I like him a lot. And as a Blazers fan, I'm like, this is a guy we need, because I feel like, even though I like Ant, I feel like the Blazers don't have a backup point guard that can come in and run the offense. I feel like it's all Dame. CJ's improved as a –
CJ is basically the backup point guard.
Yeah, and he's doing well this year as far as like his assists and assist-to-turnover ratio. Yeah. But I would love for them to have at least a game manager. So I'm hoping Preston is someone that can end up in the Blazers uniform, because I think that, I don't know, I just like the big point guards that can run pick and roll and knock down open shots. I think there's always a spot for them in the NBA.
Yeah. Similar hair to CJ Ellaby.
Yeah.
The Blazers drafted in the second round. But yeah, he's been just a guy who I think with that Illinois game, because Illinois is a great team and has some really intriguing draft talent in their own right. Io, I think, really put it together this year. Kofi is just going to be there because he's enormous, and I think he's either second or leading the nation in dunks. And then a guy like Adam Miller and Andre Curbelo, they're freshmen, both really intriguing guys as well. But yeah, Preston was the best player on the floor, and he is really impressive. I know that when I was looking over Ohio recently, I know they've lost a few games. Like I'm kind of hoping they'll be like that Cinderella team that from the MAC, and they lost to Akron, and Akron has a guy. I don't know much about him. I still need to watch a little bit more. His name's Lauren Christian Jackson, and this guy is putting up some crazy numbers as well. Like one of the leaders in the nation in both points and assists. And I saw that he had a huge game against Ohio, and they beat Ohio 90-70. But yeah, Preston is a guy that I think is certainly on the draft shortlist this year as far as possible second round guys. I'm not sure about him being a first round pick because of the lack of athleticism and him needing to kind of win more by craft. But yeah, he's just certainly a guy who is a very smart player.
The 48% from three helps.
Insane. Yeah.
And it's not 48%.
Shot really well last year too.
Yeah, shot 40% from three, which, his freshman year was 20%. It more than doubled from a freshman to sophomore. And now he's at 48%. But it's weird because he's only shooting 57% from the free throw line.
That's a little concerning. Though he's been like in the mid 70s the first years, but yeah, you'd like to see, because I think taking long twos and making long twos very like that's a huge part of shooting as well. But yeah, college 3-point percentage, if you don't have the free throw percentage to back it up, like somewhere in the mid 70s to low 80s is what you would hope at minimum usually for a point guard. But yeah, it's you're just hoping that he gets it back up. And some guys go through like, shooting ruts as far as free throw shooting. So yeah, still somebody who you're at least pretty happy with what he's been able to do from long range.
Yep. The Lauren Christian Jackson, 5'8".
Yeah, I know. Crazy. So like I'm
150.
But killing it.
Yeah.
Those really fun like small school guys.
Yeah. And he's pretty efficient from the floor. Now, who's another prospect that you have on your radar as a possible second round pick, or just someone that you think could end up being drafted?
Yeah, somebody who I think has a chance, and it's certainly a possibility he could enter. What do you think of Jalen Wilson from Kansas?
So I have a funny story.
One of the standout guys.
So I live in Dallas, and I've had a chance to see him play in high school. This summer, there was a guy that was having some pickup runs in Fort Worth, and I would go there. I think I probably went like maybe 4 or 5 times. Drew Timme was there playing. Jalen Wilson was there. Tavion Harmon from Oklahoma was there. There was a few college guys. And I had went with Kay Felder, from Oakland. So I was with Kay, and we would go there to play. And so Jalen was there, and he was always on the team with his dad. And I used to see his dad playing around pickup games here in Dallas. Had no clue that they were father and son. And I think somebody else, Nimhart from TCU, who's having a pretty good year, he was there. Okay. So I thought Jalen, like, man, he has the body, he has the tools, but he was not dominating these pickup games. Not at all. Mm-hmm. Looking, just kind of filling a role. Not looking, I don't know. I just say, for lack of a better term, I wasn't overly impressed. Mm-hmm. And then I see him the first game of the year, and he really just has improved. Well, I shouldn't say that. He's looked a whole lot better in a structured system at Kansas than he did in just these pickup games. I think the year off helped him out some. He probably was able to, of course, he had an advantage. He was around the team. He learned, even though he's a freshman, he just
Yeah.
technically he's like a sophomore. He's gotten stronger, and he's having a phenomenal year. I mean, he's,
Yeah.
in my opinion, right now, he's Kansas's best player.
Yeah.
Going into the year, it was debatable.
Absolutely.
You know, some thought it was Marcus Garrett, some thought it was Agbaji.
Yeah.
But I think right now he's their best player.
Yeah, I think he has been. And, you know, in that game against Creighton where he went off in the second half, and then he's been shooting well. Like, he's shooting, I think, 37% from three. Just really good around the basket, too, showing some nice touch. Just, I see him more as like kind of like a stretch forward kind of mold.
Yeah.
So I'm not completely sold on him being like going to the NBA. But the other thing I know is he was like a top 30, 40 guy coming out of high school.
Yep.
And so he had hype coming out of high school, expectations. Kansas gives him a red shirt. But yeah, I guess we shouldn't be as surprised. And like, you know, I understand you being surprised having seen him and him not necessarily standing out. But yeah, like, he was certainly a guy that I think was on the radar as a high school player, as a guy who could potentially come into college and make some noise. But yeah, what he's been able to do, kind of really interesting, like having a top 30, 40 guy redshirt, and then he came in and wasn't necessarily considered one of Kansas's top guys, and he's been their, I would say, most consistent guy.
Yeah, I guess the red shirt was because he broke his foot.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a regular red shirt. But you know what? I just thought about it. I filmed him and RJ Hampton, so they're best friends. And so I filmed a workout probably right after everything kind of opened back up, where people were allowed to go back in gyms. And I filmed the workout, and RJ Hampton, shout out to Rod Hampton Sr., he says Jalen's going to be a draft pick next year. So he says, you might as well get both of them because Jalen's going to be in the draft next year. And Jalen has
that footage out, man.
Yeah, I just thought about it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just thought about it. But yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely put his name on the radar. But for you, I guess you said you think that he's more so of a small ball forward. And I guess that was my question is, what is his best position? Like, he's, you know, back in the day, he would be a tweener, which now being a tweener is actually seen somewhat as a positive. But as far as like how his style of play fits into the NBA, where do you see him being? What type of player do you see him being in the NBA?
Yeah, to me, he seems like more of like that kind of energy, like backup guy, and, you know, able to take advantage over maybe like smaller wings or like slower power forwards, like that kind of thing. Like, also having some ability to stretch. You'd like to see the defensive numbers, I guess, improve a little, and like the fact that he only has 4 steals and 2 blocks. But yeah, and then pretty like high turnover rate also right now, I would say. But yeah, there are some things to be ironed out, which is I think part of my concern with him being like that, you know, pure small forward. But yeah, like as far as the tweener goes, if you have the ability to play some small forward and some power forward, that is a huge thing in the NBA. Yeah. So if you can play either forward spot, like I think that probably best sums up the Blazers forwards right now, is they are both guys that can play 3-4. But you're not necessarily sure which one you want playing which.
Well, so, last time we had that, we went to the conference finals and we had those 2 guys you didn't know.
Al-Farouq and Mo.
Yeah. So I'm all for it. All right, one last prospect. Who is the last prospect on your radar that has caught your attention this year?
All right. Sorry to be a homer, but I watched this player quite a bit and wanted to shout him out just because not only do I think he's a draftable prospect, but he's just a really fun player also, and just does some of those things that you want from like a wing guy, and I think kind of like a wing guard at this point. has improved his handle, and that's Chris Duarte from Oregon. A little bit older, and he'll be 24 by draft time, but he's from Dominican Republic, spent some time in Canada as well, and then I think was in high school in Florida, goes to Northwest Florida State, and he is the JUCO Player of the Year as a sophomore. And for the past 2 years at Oregon, last year he was, I believe, their second leading scorer, is their second leading scorer this year, but just has gained a ton of confidence as a shooter. Over this past weekend, he nailed like 3 3-pointers at crucial moments in back-to-back games against Cal and Stanford. And a lot of them as pull-ups, so kind of creating his own shot, has been a terror in passing lanes and just gets a ton of steals, and then makes like some really surprisingly athletic plays at times, and gets these like cool kind of blocks from behind. And he's just I think a really good instinctual defender, and has some real offensive skill as well. He's not like the best playmaker, but he certainly like has some chops there and is a willing passer. So yeah, Chris Duarte is somebody who I think has been on the NBA radar with how well he played last year, and is somebody who I think NBA teams still might be interested in like later in the second round, and is, I think, absolutely at least a guy who gets a two-way and has teams bring him into training camp.
I agree, but with you threw me off with the introduction when you said that you were, I guess you said being a homer. I just knew you were talking about Marcus Carr. Because he's from Toronto.
I got the Oregon jersey in the back. I'm more of a Duck than I am a Canadian rap.
Okay, because I know you have ties to Toronto. So
I'm definitely both, but yeah, I live in Oregon now, and yeah. So
I think that if he keeps playing the way he's played the last 3 games, he's definitely going to catch the attention of scouts, and maybe he could sneak into the second round. He's someone that I don't see on any draft boards right now, but I think it's still very early. I'm not one that puts out a draft board or a big board or a mock before January 1st. But he's played well, especially the last, the first 2. Well, I guess, I don't know, this year is weird. Is it just me, or did conference play start early this year?
It started early just because the season started so late.
Yeah, because it's like you see a conference game and then you see like 3 games against
there was
non-conference.
No non-conference games. That's the other thing. Most teams had a very limited non-conference schedule. It definitely did start early, because I know Oregon played their first conference game on December 12th, and then there was a huge break until they played their next conference game.
Yeah, because Washington was the first one, right? Yeah.
It's been really strange, but yeah, it's I think mostly going to be conference games this year, which should be really interesting because as far as the Power 5 conferences are concerned, like that's usually what you really look at in terms of matchups and in terms of playing against other guys who are NBA caliber players.
Yep. But yeah, Duarte, the last 2 conference games he's played well, but right now he is at 50, 40, 90, which is always impressive. I mean, that's like at least to me, the ideal stat line for a shooter, 50, 40, 90. And through 9 games,
if you can get there, it's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. And Peyton Pritchard didn't even get there last year, and he was a first-team All-American. So, yeah, it's really nice. I don't know if it's sustainable for Duarte, but yeah, he's just looked really good, really comfortable this year, and great thing to see. It's really nice because he's playing next to a former teammate of his from Dominican Republic and Figueroa, and then you have a Canadian. I would call him a small ball 5, but basically big man who's 6'6", and Eugenio Maruyi, who's having a tremendous year also. And the transfer Eric Williams Jr. From Duquesne. Oregon has like 4 6'6" guys who are at the very least college studs, And I wouldn't be surprised if Duarte is the guy that makes the NBA out of that group.
Well, if the success of Peyton Pritchard this year, and I feel like I owe him an apology, I had him going to Portland with their
46.
Yes. And
okay.
I was
that's
way
not
wrong.
Bad, man.
Well,
that's not bad.
I was way wrong because he went in the first round. I did not have him as a first rounder. And
it was the rumor. It was the rumor he was going first round. And me, even as an Oregon fan, I was like, what team is going to take him in the first round? And then you realize, so Danny Ainge has Portland ties. And
that's true.
One story I'll tell you is that as a sophomore, Peyton Pritchard played for what we call the Portland Generals. And that's the USA team in the Hoop Summit doesn't usually go up against each other. Mm-hmm. They go up against a team they call the Portland Generals, and it's usually a bunch of college players or guys who used to play college. One year it was Steve Blake. So yeah, they get a bunch of guys and go up against that team. So sophomore Peyton Pritchard goes up against senior Tyus Jones. And at the beginning, sophomore Peyton Pritchard is kind of kicking his butt. Tyus gets the better of him, I think, when all things are said and done. But people left that going, who is this kid? Because he looked like he was 15, and he was 15. And yeah, it was a really impressive performance. And as a senior, he makes the Hoop Summit team. And that was a team in 2016 where Danny Ainge goes, these are a bunch of studs. Like, that was a really good USA team. And the guy, to me, I know he wasn't ranked necessarily the top guy coming out of that game and those practices, but the guy who at least played the best to me in those practices and in the game combined was Jason Tatum.
Yep.
And we know what happens there with them trading down and saying, we would have taken this guy number 1 anyway, but we feel like we can get him at 3. And right now he looks like he's the best player in that draft.
Yeah, I mean, just think, the Lakers passed him up. They could have had him. Philly, too.
Oh, yeah. But they got Anthony Davis. So that worked.
Yeah. They definitely got Anthony Davis. Well, all right, man. I thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I definitely want to have you on a few more times between now and the draft. Again, this is Rafael Barlow with the NBA Draft Junkies podcast, and I have my guest. Do you go by Michael or do you go by Mikey?
Either.
It doesn't matter. Mikey Visenberg from the Viseland podcast. And where, if anyone wants to follow you on social media or listen to your podcast, where can they find you at?
Type in the name Michael Visenberg. I'm on Twitter at NBA Draft Mikey V, at Viseland, ViselandPod@gmail.com. Follow my brother at J Visenberg. If you look up Perspective Insight or Pro Insight, follow that as well. I have work going all around those platforms. And if you also want to look for Viseland we're either on YouTube or look for us on Anchor FM. And we'll be available across all podcast formats. And Rafael, just thank you so much for having me on. And I would love to come on again. So yeah, it's been great talking with you, man.
Oh yeah, no problem. I definitely plan to have you on. I'm glad that we've talked about this for months now, but finally we're able to make it happen. So thanks again for coming on such a short notice. And I look forward to just chatting with you on Twitter about the draft and so on. So again, it's Rafael, NBA Draft Junkies. Got Mikey Visenberg from Viseland, and we are out.